This is True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time. Week by week, you'll hear the true stories behind the operations that have shaped the world we live in. You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position? I'm Rhiannon Neads, and this is True Spies from Spyscape Studios.
And what that means for U.S. intelligence agencies is that they no longer dominate the collection analysis of intelligence like they once did. Anybody with a laptop can find out all sorts of information.
Welcome to True Spies, Tradecraft.
And at the end of the meeting, Hitler says, I'd really like to consult you from time to time on, how my policies are going down in London. And that's how he gets in with Adolf Hitler himself.
This is your second annual installment of True Spies Tradecraft. A look back at some of the best examples of spycraft used by our agents in the series over the last year. And there is no better place to start than by looking at the tradecraft used to carry out one of the most dangerous missions in this profession, working undercover. Extremely dangerous, in fact, when it's August 1943, and especially when you're about to pose as a German officer in Nazi-occupied Belarus. The agent we're following is Russian-born Nikolai Chokolov.
His task is going to be essentially to take on the role of a Nazi convincingly enough that he can be dropped behind enemy lines and pass for one.
You'll need some training for that.
And the mission is that he has to try to assassinate Wilhelm Kuber, who is the Nazi governor of Belarus.
Rigorous training, then. Our guide for this most dangerous of missions is Sean Walker.
I'm an international correspondent with The Guardian newspaper. I spent more than a decade living in and reporting on Russia, and I'm the author of a recent book which I've spent the last almost a decade researching, which is called The Illegals, and it's about Russia's deepest cover spies.
Spies like Nikolai Chokolov.
In the summer of 1942, Nikolai starts his training. Part of this is tradecraft. He learns how to mix vodka and glucose into a solution that enables you to write letters in invisible ink. He's taught how to decode radio messages, and he's also given some shooting practice. And of course, key for his upcoming mission, he has to practice parachute jumps from small Douglas airplanes. But probably much more importantly than all of this, because it's what the success of the entire mission is predicated on, he has to learn how to speak, look, walk, think like a German. And for this, the NKVD puts him in an apartment with a German communist called Karl Kleinjung, who had fled Germany after the Nazi takeover.
Though German by birth and distinctly Aryan in his features, Karl was as faithful a Soviet servant as the center could hope to find. After fleeing the Nazis, he had fought on the side of the communists in the Spanish Civil War and settled afterwards in the Soviet Union. Under Karl's tutelage, Nikolai undergoes a crash course in German language and mentality, though much has changed in his homeland since Karl fled. Together, they study Nazi propaganda pamphlets, newspapers, and radio broadcasts.
This sort of puts them in the mindset, but of course it's not enough. So they're taken to a prisoner of war camp not too far outside Moscow, where they're able to interview captured Germans about their everyday lives as a Nazi officer.
Nikolai and Karl grill the captured Nazis for particulars. How do you march? How do you greet your superiors? What slang do you use?
Basically, all these tics and these little things that could be so telltale in the field.
But until they can put those quirks to the test, it will all remain dangerously abstract. And so the NKVD arranged for Nikolai and Karl to visit another camp, This time, not as interrogators, but prisoners.
It's been arranged that they're actually going to be given German uniforms and they're going to spend time in this camp and see if they can pass as real captured Germans among other captured Germans. Only the commander of the camp knows who they really are. Nikolai, of course, I mean, his German by this point is pretty good, but it's not native. So he's trying his hardest to really not to speak unless he's spoken to blend in, to observe. And so they spend a few weeks in this camp, looking at the other Germans, listening to their stories, trying to pretend they don't understand anything when it's in Russian, when the guards or nearby villagers are barking abuse at them. And then once a day in the evening, they spend an hour with their NKVD supervisors going over how the day went, what they'd learned, what they still needed to work on.
By the end of a month in the German camp, Karl and Nikolai have surprised even themselves by completely evading suspicion. There is no further training the NKVD could offer them.
In August 1943, they're finally ready. It's been, a year of training, quite a long time in the chaos of war, perhaps not that long to convincingly take on the identity of a soldier of another country. But they're put in an unmarked plane, which is camouflaged in grey-green paint and has no lights, and it takes off from a military airfield outside Moscow and heads west.
Of course, if you've been listening to our Brief Histories minisodes this year, you'll know that this kind of undercover tradecraft is nothing new. In fact, they've been at it for a very, very long time. Luckily for us, Dr. Jenny Benham is here to tell you exactly how long.
So I'm really a historian of medieval diplomacy and sort of international history of international law. And it was really while I was researching my last book on international law, I was reading quite a lot of treaties.
Jenny was a guest on the True Spies debrief, discussing the many facets of medieval spycraft. We join her here as she's providing an excellent example of medieval spy mastery, the use of servants, household illegals if you like, as spies.
So spies or servants very frequently, who are planted into someone's household in order to gather information or to carry messages in lots of ways back to their lord. And in particular, they tend to be kind of planted into households where there are suspicions that that the lord might be a rebel, for example. So we know from 1220, for example, there is a really great letter. It's referred to as a spy report, one of the first espionage reports from medieval England. And it talks about this man who is clearly following the household of a suspected rebel in the reign of King Henry III of England. And he has been planted there by Robert Lexington, who is a kind of middling official, we might think.
Robert Lexington is passing on this spy's intel to the royal court of Henry III.
And in this spy report, he says that my man is currently tracking one of the people who are suspected of being a rebel. He is following him from basically from Oxford all the way through kind of Nottinghamshire and into Yorkshire and towards the border with Scotland. And Robert O. Lexington has received some sort of message from the man that he has planted into the rebels' household. And he is basically acting on that message. And he says, I'm going to go and secure all the castles on the border between England and Scotland to make sure that the rebel is not kind of, able to do us any further harm. And then he says that, fear not, my man is still with the rebel's household, and he is slowing him down by basically making sure that his horses get ill so he can't kind of carry on. And he also says, don't worry, my man will continue to provide reports to me, and so I will keep you informed, basically. So it's a really, really great example of someone that has clearly been planted into the household. And I think it's probably the first clear evidence that we have of that.
And in medieval times, as now, undercover spies were sometimes given deadlier duties.
Very often when we get evidence of assassins, they are people who have been planted into households of various individuals. So, for example, there is a really interesting charter from the early 12th century. It is of Count Hugh of Champagne. There was an attempted assassination of Count Hugh by a household servant. Now, this household servant, he had actually been a soldier in a former life, and he was captured. So here we have that theme of captivity again. And Count Hugh is doing such good service to Christendom by kind of releasing this man, showing how merciful he is. And this is, of course, a way of getting himself straight into heaven, in case you're wondering. So he's doing a very good service by basically buying up these kind of captives and kind of releasing them into their households. And the servant was there for a few years, and he was ingratiating himself with Count Hugh and doing him great service, was very loyal. And then suddenly he tries to slit his throat. Ah, surprise. Fortunately, Count Hugh manages to escape. And basically, he goes to this particular monastery where they nurse him back to health. And the reason why we know about this incident is because afterwards, once he is healthy again, Count Hugh basically gives some land to this particular monastery. And that's how we know about this particular incident.
Jenny is still getting to the bottom of who tried to assassinate Count Hugh. A tough assignment when all your sources have been dead for centuries. We've seen a bit of a theme develop here between the brave beneficiaries of MI9's tech expertise and the lucky Count Hugh. Escapology. And in our next example, we're travelling to the Republic of Ireland to drop in on another daring extraction attempt. Our guide? That's David Burke, an author and lawyer working in Dublin.
I've written 4 books, broadly speaking, featuring British intelligence activities in Ireland on both sides of the border.
It's 1972, at the bloody height of the long conflict remembered as the Troubles, fought between Irish Republicans and forces loyal to the British Crown. For all the historical context, check out David's full episode of True Spies, The Secret Policeman. And the policeman in question is Patrick Crinian, a top analyst inside C3, the intelligence wing of the Republic of Ireland's police force, and a mole for MI6.
When he reached his peak usefulness to the British, he had access to every single security secret available.
He's on the hunt for Sean McStearphone, the leader of the Provisional IRA. Earlier that year, Crinian's MI6 handler had told him that a particular telephone number in Dublin was a contact number used by the Belfast Provisional IRA to reach IRA HQ. Crinian had the guards put a tap on the phone, and that finally tipped them off to McStearphone's location.
They discovered that Sean McStearphone was going to be in Dublin. He was going to be giving an interview to a journalist, and they waited outside until after the interview had completed, and they followed the car.
On the 19th of November, 1972, Sean McStearphone was brought into police custody. His response was to engage in the tried and tested protest of those who consider themselves political prisoners, the hunger strike.
He continued with this hunger and thirst strike for a while, and he was put into hospital.
On day 8 of his strike, the Provisional IRA mobilised to free their leader. The first of 2 very different extraction attempts. And the IRA used that most theatrical of tradecraft techniques, disguise. Gunmen disguised as Catholic priests entered the hospital and made their way towards McStearphone's room. But the police weren't fooled. They managed to repel the IRA men, but not before they squeezed off a few rounds.
There was a minor shootout, but nonetheless a shootout occurred, and this caused panic.
Patrick Crinian saw the need to move McStearphone to a secure location. But outside the hospital, crowds of protesters gathered in his name. More gunmen would be along soon. moving McSteerphone openly could well end in disaster. But the provisionals didn't have a monopoly on the art of disguise.
Now, C3, I've been describing C3 as a nerve centre and a department where things were analysed, but it also, obviously, the policemen up there were quite active guys, and there was an ambulance that the police used, and Rhiannon and others descended upon the hospital dressed as doctors, went in. Nobody really paid much attention to an ambulance going into the hospital.
Rhiannon, the doctor that wasn't, entered McSteerphone's hotel room. For all Rhiannon knew of the man, as much as they'd both played the same game on opposite sides, this was the first time he'd ever seen him face to face.
And he says, now we're moving you to another hospital.
But Sean McSteerphone wouldn't go quietly. Suddenly, Rhiannon found himself in a desperate wrestling match with an enemy of the state.
It was a bit of a kerfuffle. Despite his weakness, McSteerphone put up a fight because he realised very quickly what was going on. These weren't real doctors at all. So you have Rhiannon and the fellas lifting him, manhandling him onto a gurney and whooshing him out the back of the hospital.
McSteerphone was rushed into a waiting helicopter.
And they're about to take him down to the military hospital in the Curragh, in the Midlands of Ireland. And McSteerphone nearly causes the helicopter to crash because he's kicking out at everybody. And they managed to subdue him and got him to the hospital, and eventually he went off his hunger strike.
Mission accomplished. So far on this episode, we've been covering down and dirty, grubbily human stories. But in the modern era, technology is changing how intelligence agencies operate. And Dr. Amy Ziegart, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, joined debrief host Morgan Childs to explain how. It's a fascinating listen. But right now, I want to direct your attention to the technological advances that might help all you would-be spies out there get a foot in the door. Welcome to the realm of open source intelligence.
Our show, True Spies, devotes a lot of attention to the collection of secrets, but something that I know you talk a lot about is how much work of the American intelligence agencies revolves around gathering open source information. How has the value of secrecy changed over time?
So secrets, Morgan, are always going to be important. You can't figure out from what's openly available what Vladimir Putin is thinking or saying to his inner circle. So you're always going to need those clandestine capabilities to get into the insights of the leadership. But there's so much more now that is available to clever detectives online. And what that means for U.S. intelligence agencies is that they no longer dominate the collection analysis of intelligence like they once did. Anybody with a laptop can find out all sorts of information. So I'll give you a couple of examples. When Russia invaded Ukraine the first time in 2014, the best intelligence about troop movements in the country did not come from secrets. It came from selfies. Soldiers are young people, like young people everywhere. They love to take pictures of themselves and post them on social media. And so Russian soldiers were posting selfies on social media that were time-stamped with Ukrainian highway signs in the background. Much better information about what was happening on the ground from selfies than from secrets. In the Osama bin Laden raid in Abbottabad, the Pakistani military didn't see the operation coming, but a local guy heard weird noises outside his bedroom and ended up live tweeting the entire operation. Again, openly available information that could compromise the security of a highly classified operation. There are teams that I'm working with here at Stanford where they're discovering new signatures of nuclear activities in North Korea. How do you know what North Korea is doing? Based on commercial thermal satellites, which is measuring heat, right? These are undergraduates working with adult supervision using commercially available satellite capabilities to identify new ways to know what North Korea is doing. It's incredible what this open source world is making available or possible, not just to the good guys, but to the bad guys too.
The internet, to a degree, has democratized intelligence gathering. Whether this is good or bad is for you to decide. Let's move away from the realm of digital possibilities towards something much more human. We began this episode with an example of incredible bravery in one of history's most brutal periods. We'll finish with another. World War II was a long and bloody war, but it was also a crucible for resistance, selflessness, and bravery. So it follows that over the course of True Spy's long run, there have been many examples and stories of spycraft from this era of conflict. So we'll leave you with another story about an undercover agent going up against the totalitarian, genocidal Nazi regime.
Well, I was leafing through Professor Keith Jeffrey's monumental book called MI6, which was produced for the centenary of the service. And I came across 6 pages which referred to a character called Baron William de Ropp, and it said that he produced 70% of the political intelligence on Nazi Germany. And I thought to myself, that is an astonishing percentage. And how could a person who had produced so much of intelligence on Nazi Germany only warrant 6 pages in a book that is 840 pages long?
This is Tim Willesee-Wilsey, our guide to the True Spies episode entitled The Baltic Baron. It follows the incredible story of Baron William de Ropp, Britain's spy inside Hitler's inner circle. And the means by which the Baron reached these gruesome heights is a masterclass in human intelligence gathering.
Long-term penetration of a hostile nation-state requires masses of patience. You've got to play it long. You can't ask obvious questions, and you can't ask to be put in touch with the person who you know has got better access. So the way he played it, whether this was a natural caution or just a testament to his skill as a secret agent, he actually resisted the pushing of his case officers and took it very gently.
So gentle, in fact, that his first port of call wasn't even a proper Nazi.
Bill de Ropp had a number of friends amongst the German Baltic aristocracy. And there was a particular Baron von Medem there who was involved with an organization called the Steel Helmets, the Stahlhelm.
The Steel Helmets were an ultra-nationalist organization made up of ex-soldiers. It grew in parallel to the Nazis and shared many of their values, a key difference being that they were in favor of a return to monarchist rule.
And I think Bill, having served in the First World War himself, had a degree of sympathy with the German war veterans, most of whom were unemployed. It was von Medem who said to him, look, I think, Bill, you'd be very interested to meet a real stormtrooper.
Von Medem introduced Bill to a friend, a member of the SA, the Nazis' paramilitary arm. His name was Hans Berthold,
who had another connection with Bill de Ropp. Berthold had served in southern Africa, so they had an African connection as well. And after knowing Berthold for a number of months, and Berthold produced some very good intelligence.
Now Bill is on the ladder to the top of the party, albeit on a very low rung.
Berthold suddenly said, Bill, I think you need to meet my boss. And his boss was a real serious Nazi called Arno Schickedanz.
Schickedanz was the Berlin correspondent for the main Nazi newspaper, and therefore a man with intimate links to the party apparatus.
So Bill is introduced to Arno Schickedanz, and again, he takes Schickedanz out for rather expensive meals in the restaurants on the Kurfürstendamm in Berlin, and they get to know each other for a number of months.
Until the inevitable.
And Arno Schickedanz suddenly says to Bill de Ropp one day, hang on a moment, he said, I think the guy you'd really like to meet is my boss, who is the Nazi ideologist Alfred Rosenberg. And Schickedanz takes him to meet Rosenberg at the railway station where Rosenberg is just traveling to Munich. And as you can imagine, in a railway station, the meeting doesn't go particularly well. But fortunately, when Rosenberg gets back from Munich, he calls up Bill de Ropp, and they have a much more substantial session. And they come to get on extraordinarily well. Rosenberg is undoubtedly a member of Hitler's inner circle, is in the inner 10 or 12 around Hitler. But he's also a bit of an oddball and not taken entirely seriously by the rest of the Nazi leadership.
That's a good thing, really. The friends of bigger beasts, say a Goebbels or a Himmler, would be under far greater scrutiny. Rosenberg's also a German Bolt, something he has in common with Bill.
I think the fact that Rosenberg is from Estonia gives them a certain sort of commonality, although Rosenberg is the first to admit that Bill is actually really a Prussian aristocrat. But also, they were both intellectuals. They liked talking about Nietzsche, although Bill de Ropp describes Rosenberg as a muddle-headed philosopher. Nonetheless, Rosenberg liked to talk about intellectual things, as indeed did Bill de Ropp. And of course, not many Nazis could do that sort of thing.
In the space of a single year, Bill de Ropp had climbed very near to the top of the tree. And he wasn't done yet. Not by a long way.
I describe these as crab-like movements because he moves from von Medem to Berthold, from Berthold to Schickedanz, from Schickedanz to Rosenberg, never through the front door, always by getting them to invite him. And the ultimate crab-like maneuver is his introduction to Hitler.
It's 1931, and Bill de Ropp is about to meet one of history's greatest monsters. Bill met with Hitler several times, and the intelligence he gleaned from his position had a big part to play in Britain's eventual victory over Germany. Knowing what to say, and when, and to whom, to read someone's intentions, to make the correct hand gesture, to shoot the right glance, de Ropp navigated a minefield of human interaction, in which one wrong move could have blown his cover. In Nazi Germany, that would likely have meant death. And in this line of work, life and death are two outcomes that are never far from an agent's thoughts. But using the range of skills and techniques that any good agent has at their fingertips, they are far more likely to keep their cover intact, complete the mission, and crucially, get out alive. Join us next time for more secret rendezvous with true spies. Disclaimer. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the subject. These stories are told from their perspective, and their authenticity should be assessed on a case-by-case basis. If you're enjoying this podcast, please click now to give it a 5-star rating or leave a review. Ratings and reviews help people discover the podcast and help us bring you more great stories. And if you have some time, why not forward the podcast to a friend?